GOP frontrunner Donald Trump is making up scary stories about American Muslims.
There were people that were cheering in the other side of New Jersey where you have large Arab populations. They were cheering as the World Trade Center came down.
Representative Keith Ellison, the first Muslim elected to Congress, is with me to respond. Plus, a Black Lives Matter activist...
Get him the hell out of here, will you please?
...violently removed from a Trump event.
Maybe he should have been roughed up.
I'll speak with an eyewitness from that rally. Then, who does America trust to handle the threat of terrorism? A new poll finds one 2016 candidate leading the entire field. And later, why the NRA is blocking a bill to keep guns out of the hands of people on the terror watch list.
The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
All In starts right now. Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. This was the scene moments ago at a Trump rally in Columbus, Ohio, after a protester reacted to comments from Donald Trump about surveilling Muslims in America. The protester shouted down by angry members of the crowd, a scene that's been repeated over and over again at Trump campaign events. From the very first day of Donald Trump's candidacy, when he referred to Mexican immigrants as criminals and rapists, his campaign has been characterized by extreme statements steeped in bigotry and bearing a tenuous relationship to facts. But Donald Trump is still the frontrunner. He's paid very little price for those kinds of comments. And in the wake of the attacks in Paris, with much of the political and media establishment stoking fear and panic, Trump seems to have concluded he can only benefit by ratcheting up the rhetoric even further. In just the last 3 days, he's trotted out a long debunked myth about American Muslims celebrating on 9/11.
I watched when the World Trade Center came tumbling down. And I watched in Jersey City, New Jersey, where thousands and thousands of people were cheering as that building was coming down. Thousands of people were cheering.
That is demonstrably not true, just so you know. He's called for the U.S. government to bring back waterboarding and the Bush-era torture regime.
So you'd bring back waterboarding?
We have to. I would bring it back. Yes, I would bring it back. I think waterboarding is peanuts compared to what they do to us, what they're doing to us, what they did to James Foley when they chopped off his head. That's a whole different level. And I would absolutely bring back interrogation and strong interrogation.
You've also.
In the event in Columbus, Ohio, he reiterated that call, and he's also retweeted blatantly racist and completely bogus crime statistics, which the website Little Green Football has traced back to a Twitter account whose bio included the line, and I am not making this up, "We should have listened to the Austrian chap with the little mustache." This afternoon, the user removed that line from the bio. No confirmation, we're guessing it was a reference to this guy. And Trump has condoned, even encouraged supporters at a rally in Alabama on Saturday who physically assaulted an African-American protester chanting Black Lives Matter during his remarks.
He was so obnoxious and so loud. He was screaming. I had 10,000 people in the room yesterday, 10,000 people. And this guy started screaming by himself. And they did, I don't know, rough up. Maybe he should have been roughed up because it was absolutely disgusting what he was doing.
What happened at that rally is just the latest in a long string of violent incidents associated with candidate Donald Trump. In August, two Boston brothers were arrested for assaulting a homeless man who was Hispanic, allegedly telling police Donald Trump was right, all these illegals need to be deported. And as with the episode this weekend, Trump didn't seem to mind much.
I haven't heard about that. I think that would be a shame, but I haven't heard about that. I will say the people that are following are very passionate. They love this country. They want this country to be great again, and they are very passionate. I will say that.
Very passionate. After some backlash, he eventually condemned the attack. In early September, Trump's own security guard, the same one he ordered to expel Jorge Ramos from a press conference, punched a protester whose sign he was confiscating. Just days later, a Trump supporter was photographed pulling the hair of a young immigration activist at a rally in D.C. And last month, a protester in Miami was kicked and violently dragged at an event while onlookers chanted, USA. Joining me now, Carlos Chavers. He's youth president, National Action Network's Birmingham chapter, who was protesting at the Trump rally on Saturday and witnessed his friend being attacked by the crowd. And Carlos, first set the scene for me. You went to protest at the Trump event in Birmingham. Where were you standing during the event?
First off, thanks so much, Chris, for having me on your show tonight. So on Saturday, once I got on the inside, it was around 11:15 that morning, and Mr. Trump had already taken the stage to speak here in Birmingham. Once I got inside, I made my way closer to the back where you see the flag is throughout the videos, and I was able to try to find the other two protesters that were a part of that were removed also. So that was the plan, was for me to link up with them once we got on the inside so that we could protest and exercise our First Amendment rights.
So one of your associates started yelling at one point, "Black Lives Matter," I believe, in the speech. Tell me what you saw happened after that, after he started doing that.
Yes, sir. So we actually started chanting, "Dump the Trump" and "Trump the chump" before we led into the Black Lives Matter protest. And so I was recording through the app Periscope, which allows you to broadcast live from anywhere in the world. And through that app, you can see in the video that as I'm recording and we're chanting, some of Trump's supporters began to knock my phone out of my hand and put their hands up and stop me from being able to record and to silence us, really. And so Mercutio, the gentleman that was assaulted, he made his way closer to the stage, and we were trying to follow right behind him. And next thing we know, about 6 to 12 guys started surrounding him and beating him and punching him and choking him, as you see on the video.
I want to stop you there, because there's Trump supporters saying none of this happened, that he was never assaulted, no one ever swung at him, no one ever choked him, that in fact it was Mercutio who was swinging. You were right there. You're telling me he was physically and violently assaulted by the folks who were there to attend the Trump rally.
Yes, sir. He was viciously attacked and assaulted by those individuals. He was choked. He was kicked. And you can see that in the video. And if there's anyone out there that can't see that, then there's a problem. We have a huge problem in America with that, where we try to paint the picture to be something that it's not. But he was, in fact, assaulted right there in Donald Trump's rally here in Birmingham.
Carlos, let me ask you this. What was that atmosphere like? I mean, when you start doing that, obviously you know that the crowd's not going to be happy. That would be true at any event, whether it's the President of the United States on down to any political event. If there's protesters going to interrupt and shout at a candidate and their supporters are there, you know they're not going to be happy. But describe what that atmosphere felt like in that moment.
Right. So this is the bottom line, is that we were actually protesting the fact that Donald Trump was in the historic city of Birmingham, a population of 75% black, a city where we have progressed so heavily from the civil rights era. And, you know, we were only trying to exercise our First Amendment rights that allow us to protest anywhere we want to, anytime, anyhow we want to do it. Now, the Constitution does not limit when we're able to protest or how we're able to do it or the way we go about doing it. Just like it was a rally and people were there yelling and screaming in support of Trump, we were there in not in support of Trump. And we had every right to exercise our First Amendment rights, which allow us to do so. And at no point, no one had the audacity to put their hands on any person that was not doing any harm to anyone else. We have that same right. And for Trump to come into Birmingham, the city of Birmingham, where my grandmother marched in a children's march back in the 60s to fight for our freedom and our civil rights, for him to come on the same night we're honoring Fred Shuttlesworth and having a reception for Fred Shuttlesworth in his memory and honor, Donald Trump is here spewing hatred and racism. And even he went as far to criticize the media for turning to when we were being escorted out of the building. He said that the media had the cameras to the back where we belong. He said that we belonged in the back. And if you know anything, we're moved so far beyond that, and that he was simply saying that black people deserve to be in the back of the room, and that's not acceptable, and we won't tolerate it. And if you ask me, I say it like this. I believe that Donald Trump is really the modern day Bull Connor. He go around our country spewing hatred and racism, and is not accepted here in the city of Birmingham. Well, we're on the verge of raising our minimum wage to $10.10 an hour. So Trump doesn't support raising the minimum wage. Yep. We welcome immigrants to our city, and Trump does not.
All right. Carlos Chavers, thank you very much for your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for having me.
I just want to play a little bit of sound to give some context about that. Donald Trump, speaking just moments ago in Columbus, Ohio, talked about this precise incident that Carlos witnessed firsthand. Take a listen.
2 nights ago, we had a phenomenal room just like this, and the place was packed. And we had one protester in the very back, And he started screaming and yelling, and really was very badly, it was terrible, actually. But security, nothing to do with my security, it's the local security, the convention center security. They took him out. The cameras never moved. I said, show the crowd. The cameras stayed. Just now they stayed the same. They never moved. They don't do it purposely. I figured maybe they weren't adjustable. But as soon as this guy was taken out, all of the cameras were right on him. You know? They were right on him. They were following him right out the door. And then they said he got treated rough. First of all, it wasn't my people if they treated him rough. But he was really misbehaving badly. It's one of those things.
They said he got treated rough. Wasn't my people, but he was misbehaving badly. You can sort of put two and two together there. I got a chance to speak earlier with Democratic Congressman Keith Ellison, one of two Muslims currently serving in Congress, and asked what he made of Trump's recent comments.
It means that he's whipping up hatred to scapegoat a minority religious group, which has some very dangerous historic precedents, as you might agree. I mean, it's the kind of behavior that it's classic demagoguery, and you know he's going to get somebody hurt. I don't suppose he cares much, but it should be the kind of behavior that is roundly denounced. And the thing that scares me is that the more he says outrageous, inflammatory things, seems like doesn't seem to cost him in terms of support, which makes me a little bit worried about the people who support him.
You just said he's going to get somebody hurt. What do you mean by that?
What I mean is that when leaders who have a national platform whip up hate and hysteria against a particular group, particularly a religious group, a minority religious group, which is that is not popular, invariably, you know, the people who are mentally unstable or motivated by hate come out of the woodwork, and you see desecrations of buildings that are associated with that group. You see assaults. You see murders. You see things happen. There's actually a fairly significant track record of this kind of thing, and I think that it really demonstrates how much of an anti-leader he really is. I mean, you know, for all the political disagreements I have for George Bush, after 9/11, he went to mosques. He said that where anybody who desecrates a mosque is going to be held accountable by the law. He made it very clear that it was not the Muslim community in the United States to blame for 9/11, and yet quite the opposite is true from Donald Trump. But it's not just Muslims. I mean, he said that Mexican Americans are bringing crime, they're bringing drugs, and some of them are rapists. And so he said this about people who are Mexican. I mean, this man is a pretty prolific hater, and he's just getting worse. He's capitalizing on people's fear. He's pandering to it. So that's what I mean by he can get people hurt.
Yeah, I mean, he also, he retweeted this sort of statistic produced by a sort of frankly white supremacist neo-Nazi sympathizing source and tweeted originally there. You know, how do you take this? I mean, you serve in Congress. This is not your first rodeo. Do you watch this and think, oh, this is terrible and unfortunate, but essentially a preposterous, very small, fervent base? Or do you think to yourself, I don't like the way this is going?
I think to myself, I don't like the way this is going. I know that every country, including our own, you know, will go through a period of trouble where leadership can lead people to a better place, or leadership can bring them to a dark, ugly place. We can get moved toward ugly episodes like Japanese internment, turning away the St. Louis, which was a boat that was trying to save Jews from the Holocaust, and got turned away from our shores. And we can have, we can rise to the occasion and offer leadership, or we can go down those dark paths. You know, I think that it can go either way, depending upon the leadership of the people who are on the scene at the given moment. And he's a very scary person to have on the scene. I'm hoping that, other people will rise up. I'm going to be using my voice as much as I can to denounce what he's saying, to tell people he's a fearmonger, he's down on America, and he's trying to whip up hate and get ordinary citizens to blame their fellow citizens for their problems. This is the very core of what it means to be a demagogue. But that's all we can do, because invariably there will be people who, drink that Kool-Aid that he's serving, and yet this is the time when we all get tested, in my opinion.
All right, Congressman Keith Ellison, great thanks.
Thank you.
Still ahead, as Donald Trump continues to take his rhetoric to new and vicious levels, his polls stay relatively untouched, perhaps even improving. How long will that last? Plus, breaking news of possible indictment for the officer involved in the shooting death of a 17-year-old Laquan McDonald. The Chicago braces for the release of dashcam footage of the incident. We'll have the latest. And later, why it is legal for people on the terror watch list to buy guns and why the NRA wants to keep it that way. Those stories and more ahead. Tonight, we have a new development in the case of Laquan McDonald. That's a 17-year-old African-American boy who was shot and killed by a white Chicago police officer last October, and whose death we've been covering for months here on this program. A source with intimate knowledge of the case tells WMAQ investigative political editor Carol Marin that the officer will be indicted tomorrow. And the tape of McDonald's death will be released on Wednesday pursuant to a court order. Now, at the time of the shooting, all the way in last October, Chicago Police Department did not offer an official account. But a spokesperson for the Fraternal Order of Police Union, said at the time, quoting the Chicago Tribune, that the team began walking toward Pulaski Road and ignored the officer's request to drop the knife. Officers got out of their car and began approaching McDonald, again telling him to drop the knife, Camden said. The boy allegedly lunged at police, and one of the officers opened fire. McDonald was shot in the chest. He was pronounced dead at nearby hospital. The medical examiner's report showed the teen was shot not just once in the chest, but 16 times in the chest, scalp, neck, elbow, leg, arms, hand, and back. Months later, the Chicago City Council unanimously approved a $5 million settlement to the team's family before any suit had been filed. Laquan McDonald's family and their lawyers have agreed not to release the dash camera footage to the public, while there is still an ongoing joint state and federal criminal investigation into the shooting. However, one of the lawyers for the family of McDonald, who's seen the video, described the footage to All In.
When Laquan is about 12 to 15 feet away from the officers, the width of an entire lane of the southbound traffic, one officer begins shooting. Laquan immediately spins to the ground, and the video then clearly shows that the officer continues to shoot Laquan multiple times as he lays in the street. 16 seconds pass from the time Laquan hits the ground until the last visible puff of smoke rises from his torso area. An officer then approaches Laquan, stands over him, and appears to shout something as he kicks the knife out of his hand.
After a judge ordered the release of the video last week, a lawyer for the officer accused of shooting 17-year-old Laquan McDonald urged the public not to rush to judgment.
We're confident that my client's actions were not only lawful, but also within department policy and within his training. We ask that everyone please refrain from prejudging this incident solely on the video alone.
City now says it will publish the video by the end of day Wednesday. Today, in anticipation of that release, Mayor Rahm Emanuel spoke with community leaders in Chicago, urging a peaceful response to the footage. Joining me now, Pastor Corey Brooks. He's founder of New Beginnings Church, who met with Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel earlier today. And Pastor, can you tell us what that meeting was like? It seems like a somewhat strange kind of situation we found ourselves in now with this case.
Yeah, well, the meeting was, it is a very strange situation, and we did have the meeting today, along with, before our meeting, there was another meeting with young political activists, and we did talk with the mayor, and he did voice his concerns. He expressed what he would like for us to do, and we expressed to him what we felt as well. So we did have the meeting, and I'm hoping and praying that we will not reach the type of situation that we've seen in Ferguson and that we've seen in Baltimore.
There seems to be a lot of worry about this video getting out in the aftermath. And yet, at the same time, it seems to me that folks who are in Chicago and who've been paying attention to this have a pretty good idea of what happened.
Yeah, we have a pretty good idea of what happened. We've heard the stories. We've heard even today from the mayor himself what he believed to have happened. Some of the facts from the case were spoken to us, and so we do know some of the details. One of the things that we do know is that a young man was shot 16 times, and that we believe when a lot of people see this, not to rush to judgment, but when a lot of people see this, it's going to cause a lot of damage. It's going to bring a lot of potential anger out of a lot of young people, and we need to be prepared for that.
Let me ask you this. For 14 months, the city has been essentially stonewalling about all of this. There's been no official comment. They have fought tooth and nail the release of that video. There was this settlement that was passed by the city council for $5 million, which is a sizable portion of money from the perspective of these kinds of things. And now all of a sudden we're going to hear that the officer's going to be indicted and the videos are going to be released. What's your reaction to that timing?
Well, the timing is rather unusual. You know, one of the questions that we want to ask is, if you're going to bring charges on tomorrow, why couldn't these charges have been brought a lot earlier? And if you made a $5.2 million settlement sometime after, why could you not bring some type of charges if there were charges to be made at that time? Why are we a year later just now bringing charges against an individual when a suit has already been settled out of court before it was even filed, matter of fact? Those are questions that need to be answered, and I'm hoping that they'll be answered on tomorrow or on Wednesday.
You know, my understanding is that there are members of the family, and I don't know if there's complete unanimous feelings among the family members. I know it's a slightly complicated situation. Laquan McDonald was a ward of the state at the time that he was killed. There are members of the family who do not want the video released, who think that no good can come of it. It'll only serve to relive the trauma. Is that a common feeling among folks you're talking to?
Well, it's not a common feeling amongst the community and the people that I talk with. Most people want the video to be released. It's a Freedom of Information Act. It's something that every American ought to be concerned about. When information is withheld from us, that ought to be available to all citizens of America. So based upon that, there are people who want that to be released. That's why the suit was filed. That's why the judge decided on their behalf to release it. And it should be released. We should know what happened. We should be able to determine what happened, and everyone should have a right to see it.
All right, Pastor Corey Brooks in Chicago, thank you for joining me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, joining me now to discuss the NRA effort to block a bill to prevent people on the government's terror watch list from buying guns are Jim Rich. He's editor-in-chief of the New York Daily News, which is waging a kind of crusade on this. Today labeled Wayne LaPierre Jihadi Wayne over his group's opposition to the bill. And my friend, Joy Reid, MSNBC national correspondent. All right, Jim. So let me make the argument that the NRA makes, and I think a lot of principled liberals and civil libertarians say, which is basically, this list is a nonsense train wreck of a constitutional disaster. There's 875,000 people or some huge amount of people on it. And, you know, we're not going to tell these people they can't enjoy other constitutionally protected rights, like you can't worship at the place you want to worship or speak or the way you want to and not vote. So why should we take their guns away?
100% legitimate argument if it were coming from anyone other than the NRA. It's convenient for the NRA to jump onto that as a defense of what is seemingly otherwise a ridiculous stance. 2,000 terror suspects, right, have allegedly purchased weapons over the past roughly 10 years. Right. If only 2% of those or so, let's say 1%, right, were actually legitimate terrorists, right, and they had the intent to carry out an act like we saw in Paris, well, you're talking about 20 or so people, and that's more than enough. You know, the NRA has roughly 5 million members, which, again, comes out to about 2% of our entire country's population. It's sort of insane that they have been able to dictate and control the conversation when it comes to this topic.
So, but here's, I just want to be clear here. I mean, is this an argument about the hypocrisy of the NRA and how insidious their role is in this debate, or is this a first-order argument for this policy and this bill?
I think it's both, and I think it's the argument for the bill because while we can agree that the terror watch list, how people are put onto it and who is put onto it, is flawed, it's what we have right now. Right. So let's assume that, okay, we're in a time of great turbulence here in the world, right? So I think we need to be taking every stride that we can to ensure as much safety as we can for the American people. This bill seems like it's a pretty easy step in that direction. Now, if you want to reconstruct how we go about creating this terror list, well, then let's do that. But let's not frame it around the argument of gun control.
So what this illustrates to me, right, is that it's just the different place that terrorism and guns occupy in our American political culture when we think about threats and safety and danger. Here's some data. Since 2000, so including September 11th, we've had a little over 3,000 Americans die through terrorism. That's all over the world. Gun homicides, just here, is 138,000 deaths, right? But these are just in totally different mental categories. Is that legitimate that they're in different categories?
No, I don't think so, because I think what happened in Paris shows that they're not, right? This wasn't a series of just bombings. There were also firearms used.
In fact, that was by far the most deadly part of this.
Exactly. And, we look at the, really deadly and horrific massacres we've seen in this country. If you then replace the characters who did them, who were white American males, with Muslims, you would have a whole different sort of category of fear that would happen in the country. I just think it's an interesting thought experiment that when you give the NRA the option between these maximalist positions on gun control or on not having gun control and the potential to exercise Islamophobia or nativism, that they still come down on the side of these maximalist positions. And you do wonder what would the scenario be where they would support gun control? Because in the past, the NRA has supported gun control.
Okay, but isn't that a strike in their favor, right? Doesn't that say, doesn't that, what you just said, doesn't that say the NRA is an organization with tremendous integrity? Right? That they're not going to pander?
Except that there's nothing in the NRA's behavior that indicates that they care about anything other than maximizing gun sales. They have not demonstrated in any way a sort of care about, the individual liberties of potential of Muslim Americans that might be on the list. They just want to sell a lot of guns.
What Joy just said here, Jim, I think about a lot. I mean, we actually experience this in real time in the network, where we will find out some news comes across and it says there's a mass shooting somewhere.
Yeah.
This many shot, this many dead, and we think, oh God. You're upset, and then you start looking in, and then there's a fork in the road about how big a story this is going to be, and that's who did it.
Sure.
And if the fork in the road goes this way, say in Oregon, where someone shot up a community college, if that had been an ISIS jihadi, that wouldn't have been a 2 or 3 day story. We would still be, that would be Paris-level coverage.
Correct.
What is that?
In what sense?
I mean, what is that? Why is that reaction so different?
Well, I think you're picking one particular mass shooting that probably got, and again, I don't know this for a fact, the least amount of coverage.
Well, partly because we've become inured to it.
Sure, no, that's 100% the easy answer. But I mean, you could also argue that Newtown, the Virginia shooting that happened on air, these were incidents that were not just 1 or 2 day news cycles. I do think, though, to Joy's point, that it might sadly take a jihadi, a certified jihadi sort of incident here in order to have the NRA sort of reach their own fork in the road and say, okay.
Well, that's, to me, the part of the policy lesson of what happened in Paris, which is horrifying, is that guns are really dangerous, and they were the most deadly weapon. There were these very complicated suicide vests that were essentially used just to kill the assailants, but what killed people were the guns, and that's something that hangs over all of us in a country with the amount of guns we have. Jim Risch and Joy Reid, thank you both.
Thank you.
That is all for this evening. The Rachel Maddow Show starts right now. Good evening, Rachel.
Good evening, Chris. Good to